look, we all fail. We all make mistakes. And that's okay, because what matters is that we try again. So I'm back, and the good news is that I have 8 books to talk through, so that's nice. If you were here last time, maybe you saw the last video, then you know that I've been working my way through my Book of the Month books, which I have basically all of them from this year to get through, and I have one classic to talk about. So, with that, I think we should just get right in. Okay, the first book we're going to talk about is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So this one I read over the course of 4 or 5 months. And I follow along with a podcast called The Literary Life, which is 2 ladies and they walk through some of the classics with you a few chapters at a time and just give context and maybe provide a little additional support, which I like for some of them because it makes it a little more reachable, a little more relatable maybe even. Okay, so Northanger Abbey is about Catherine Morland, who is very naive. She's very young. She's 19, I think. And so she's kind of getting introduced to society for the first time and meeting people. And she's very naive to relationships. And also, she's really into Gothic romances. And that makes her see terror and deadly events around every corner, basically. I'm always amazed at how well Jane Austen translates to the modern era. So much of the humor in here in Northanger Abbey and the relationship dynamics are basically exactly what you would see today. It's just the set dressing has changed, basically. So I really enjoyed that in this book. I feel so I've read Mansfield Park and Pride and Prejudice. So I've only read 2 of Jane Austen, 3 now. But I think so far Northanger Abbey is the one where the humor is the most obvious, maybe, at least for me. Because this is also a satire of the Gothic novel, right? The main character is obsessed with the Gothic romances, the Gothic novels, and so Austen is kind of spoofing that a little bit. She's spoofing a lot of stuff in here, satirizing a lot of the culture around entertainment and reading, especially in the late 1790s, which I thought is it's such a niche topic, but also so fascinating. And she does it so well, too. This is one of her earlier books, which maybe you can tell in some places, but honestly not really. It holds up. It's very good. Austen also does the social villain very well, I think is what I would call it. They're not evil necessarily. They're not trying to murder the main character, but they are just kind of nefariously annoying, I think is the best way to put it. So in here, right, it's Isabella and John Thorpe, who Isabella wants to marry Catherine's brother, John Thorpe wants to marry Catherine, so they're kind of always trying to get her to hang around them, do what they want to do, even though that's not what Catherine wants to do, which is kind of one of the main conflicts of the book, I would say, up until the end. But Austen writes those characters so well, and they become so memorable, and you do get to really dislike them so intensely, which makes sense on one hand because Austen is just such a good writer, but on the other hand, it is very funny because you're intensely despising people who are just kind of diverting Catherine's social calendar. So all in all, I would say this one was a 5-star for me. It was really good. I don't think I have any detractions, right? There's nothing that stood out that I didn't like. It's a classic, solid, great Jane Austen novel. Okay, next up we have the only romance of this session, P.S. I Hate You by Lauren Connolly. So this one is about Maddie Sanderson, whose brother has just died, and in his will he has tasked her and his best friend, who is also her romantic archenemy, with going and spreading his ashes across 8 different locations around the US. So I do like a good romance every now and then. It's not my main category, but if it's a Book of the Month book and it's there and it sounds good, I'll definitely read it and enjoy it. And this one was really good. I think with a lot of romance books, or honestly just a lot of contemporary fiction in general, a big problem I have is that it kind of feels like the characters are just there to set up the plot and to keep the plot going on. So they kind of don't feel like fleshed out people very much. They feel like a cardboard cutout. It's just kind of going along to hit all the tropes, fulfill all of the key plot points that readers like. But this one didn't feel like that at all to me. The characters were very well done. They had a lot of background and a lot of personality quirks, and also you could tell that they were going on their own journey, and that not just for the main two characters, but some of the side characters as well, which I really enjoyed. I also liked how much it focused on Maddie's journey with herself, right? It wasn't just, I'm sad, my brother died, here's a man, now I'm fixed, which is sometimes how the romance novels tend to go. She kind of had to take her own little journey and take a minute and work on herself, and I like that. I felt a little more realistic than how some of these romances go. So I really enjoyed that. Also, it was funny, which I like, in a genuine way. You know, and even if, like, she could be frustrating at times, Maddie, I think, is a character, at least I really came to like and came to enjoy, and this is one where I didn't want it to end, because I didn't want to end my time with these characters, because they were just fun and likable and funny, and it was a good story. This one was also a 5-star for me, which is kind of rare for a romance, for, like, the reasons I kind of already said. But yeah, this one was really good. I don't think I have any negative notes similar to, like, Northanger Abbey. Next, we're moving into the contemporary genre, and we have Blue Sisters by Coco Malors. I think that's how you say her name. So this one is about 3 sisters who end up back at their family's New York apartment following the death of their 4th sister. So the eldest is a recovering addict who's now a straight-laced, kind of almost uptight lawyer living in London. The next one is a former boxer who's working at a bouncer in LA, and then their youngest sister is a model. So really this book is about the 3 sisters struggling with and trying to process their 4th sister's death, which happened a year ago when this book takes place. So I definitely liked that all of these sisters had such a different backstory and a different background. That made it interesting, and the worlds that they were in were also very interesting. Like, Bonnie is a boxer, so you get some of the boxing world, and then Lucky being a former model, she goes to Paris, and she has some modeling shows, and you get sort of that side of things too. And I definitely did like that. On one hand, it kind of made them, I don't know, it made them feel so different that you can really see the sister connection in a way, because, I don't know, what are the odds? What are the odds of that sort of mix, I guess? In that regard, I do wish we got a little more of Nikki, the 4th sister who's died at the time of this book. I wish we got more of her story. They go into it a little bit, but it kind of all centers around her death, and so I wish we got to see a little more of her life. Okay, so I really did like this one overall. It was really good. I enjoyed it. I like getting to know the characters. It did kind of feel like something was missing, which maybe that's kind of not fair of me because I can't tell you what was missing, but it just felt a little less than whole. I don't know if that makes sense. So overall, I gave this one a 4, just because of that sort of a lack of a feeling, which, again, that's just me. That's just my taste. I would definitely recommend this one. You should, if you have the chance, you should pick it up. Yeah, this was good. A solid 4-star. So our next book is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. So this one is about Professor Phoebe Stone. She teaches English at a college, and she ends up going to this grand hotel but before she can do that, she meets a bride. And so Lila, who is the bride, is having her wedding at this hotel, and it's a week-long wedding extravaganza. And all the people in attendance at the wedding are characters, and so Phoebe ends up kind of accidentally falling into this wedding party and going through all of these motions, meeting all of these people. And it's kind of about her journey with that, her journey with Lila and the groom and everyone else. So this book was really funny. Not to sound completely lame and boring, but sometimes it takes a lot for a book to be funny to me, just because, I don't know, like, funny humor on the page is different from humor in, like, a TV show or a movie, but this one was very, very funny. Despite, like, the dark, what you would think would be a dark tone, it's actually becomes kind of light and funny. One thing I really liked about this book is how unique the plot was. Like, sometimes you get a book and you go, okay, this is like, I know books like this, I've read things like this. This one was like, where are we where are we going with this? What's happening? It was at the same time kind of dark and tragic, but also funny and lighthearted, which is an interesting mix, but I think it works so well in this, well enough that it was a 5-star for me. As a character, I definitely loved Phoebe. She was emotionally compelling, and you could sympathize with her, but you were also kind of like, what are you doing, to her at certain points in the book? But I really liked Phoebe, and I really liked all the other characters. They didn't, like I said earlier, one of my complaints sometimes about books is that the characters feel like cardboard cutouts, and they did not feel like that in this one. They felt like fleshed out people, definitely humorous and a little more flamboyant, maybe, than like normally people are, but I don't think it hurt their journey at all, their character at all. This is it's a plot and it's a book and it's characters that I think if they were not executed just right and executed in the right way, I don't think it would reach my expectations, or it wouldn't be as good, but I think this was done almost perfectly. A really solid 5-star. I would definitely pick this one up if you can. Okay, our next book is unfortunately our first casualty of the video. This is Middletide by Sarah Crouch. Okay, so this book is a mystery thriller involving the town's doctor, Dr. Aaron Landry, who is found dead, deceased, on the property of the town's prodigal son, failed writer Ethan Lythe. And so this sort of follows that conflict, where you can tell that people are suspicious about this author who has returned to the town after 20-some years, I think, maybe 10 to 20 years. And then this doctor is all of a sudden found dead on his property. So I wanted to like this one, and I really did like the first half. So the first half, while we're in here, Ethan comes back to his father's cabin. His father is deceased, and he sort of reclaims the cabin from nature, kind of. He basically starts what today we would call like homesteading, right? He picks up the farm, he rebuilds the cabin, he brings chickens back, and that portion of the book I really liked. I thought it was interesting. I liked following his story, hearing more about him. But then you get to the second half of the book, and this is where I feel like the plot didn't make a lot of sense, unfortunately, or at least it felt very abrupt. And I don't want to give like spoilers, I guess, in case you do want to pick this up, but to me it didn't really flow very well. There also, at the very end of this book, is a court scene where the court proceedings are not quite accurate, and some of it doesn't check with how it would really go, which some people that doesn't matter, and some people that would irk them. To me, it kind of irked me a little bit after following this plot that felt so sudden and abrupt, and kind of like it felt like the twist was done for the shock value and not for an effective plot value. The other part about this book that left me feeling a little weird is that the author invents an indigenous tribe that there are characters from that tribe. She talks about a reservation a little bit in this book, and so the book is set in the Pacific Northwest, and there are tribes in the Pacific Northwest. So on one hand, I understand her reasoning for inventing a tribe, for inventing a group of indigenous Americans. I also can understand people who would feel like, well, maybe we could have researched an existing group of people and gone from there. And here's my other thought about that. The group that she invents, the tribe that she invents, doesn't really play a part in the story at all. So it's not like a key piece. It's just kind of like, here's this tribe, here's their name, it's not real, I made it up. The end. So, I don't know. It didn't interrupt the story, it didn't make me want to put it down, but it was kind of like, that's an interesting choice. So overall, this one was a 2-star for me. It just didn't quite hit all the way. So, I would recommend like picking it up for yourself, maybe from your local library or something, and seeing how you feel about it. Okay, our next book and our second and last mystery of this video is The Return of Ellie Black by Emiko Jean. Okay, so this book is about Ellie Black. She's a teenager. She disappeared from Washington State 2 years prior to when this book starts. And so at the beginning of the book, this isn't a spoiler, it's in the synopsis, I promise. But you find out that Ellie Black has returned. She's been found on a road by father and son, I think. And she ends up going back home. But throughout the story, you kind of figure out that something isn't quite right with Ellie Black. Something's still a little strange. So Detective Chelsea Calhoun ends up picking up the case and investigating what's really going on with Ellie Black. Is there something weird, or is she just dealing with being abducted? So I really enjoyed the writing in this one. I thought it was really well done. I also liked how, so you get the perspective of Ellie Black when she's being held captive, but you also get the modern day perspective of Detective Calhoun trying to figure out what's going on with Ellie Black and what happened to her and who abducted her. I thought it kind of, the author really wove those storylines in and out well. It was well done in that aspect, which sometimes can feel disjointed, I think, but this was really well done. It also felt for me almost like one step away from a stream of consciousness sort of writing. Like you almost felt like you were in the characters' minds, processing what they were processing, and I like that. It wasn't too much, but it was kind of like almost there. Another thing I think that helped to kind of add some depth is that some of the characters were very morally gray. It wasn't just a simple, like, this character is good, this character is bad. You kind of got a weaving of the two, which especially in a mystery thriller, I think sometimes you just get into, like, the detective is the good guy, the bad guy is the bad guy, and then, you know, that's great, and that can be very well done too, but I just appreciated that it was a little more on the gray side. The only thing I would have appreciated, like if it was different in this book, is I would have liked if the end was a little slower, maybe not so fast-paced, or if the reveal didn't happen so fast. If there had been more clues, maybe, which maybe there were these clues and I just didn't notice because maybe I wasn't paying attention, but if it had happened a little slower, if we had had a little more planning, it felt like the ending was done in part for, like, shock value, which worked, but at the same time, I wouldn't have minded if the shock value was lessened and the clues were added. Like, I wouldn't have minded to see it coming a little bit, but just to, like, understand maybe their motives a little bit more, or to see more of their thought process, the planning, the background in that aspect. Overall, this was a really solid 4.5 star for me. It was almost there, almost to a 5-star, but not quite. Okay, our second to last book is The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. So this one is horror, technically, and it follows Clem. So her 19-year-old daughter, Erin, is unconscious in the hospital after a hiking trip with her friends on the remote Orkney Islands met a horrifying end, leaving her boyfriend dead and her best friend missing. So when Erin wakes, she doesn't recognize her mother, and she doesn't answer to her name, but insists she is someone named Nyx. So I really wanted to like this one. The setting was cool. I really liked the premise, but at the end, it just felt maybe a little lackluster for me. The plot wasn't all the way there. It wasn't all the way solid. So you end up in this book, you're kind of following two timelines. You're following Allison in the 1500s, who's from a magical clan, and it's following her conflict with the ruling governors of the Orkney Islands, that area. But then you're also following Clem, who, kind of as we said, her daughter's in the hospital. She's claiming that her name is Nyx. She's suffering from burns, and they're trying to figure out what happened with Erin. So I did feel like there were a lot of loose ends, a lot of plot points that I wish were kind of fleshed out all the way, that were finished, that you could kind of have some more closure on. Specifically, or as an example, so Edward. If you don't want spoilers, hop to this time to get out of spoilers. But so Edward is Allison's son. He's about 12, I think. And he kind of takes over his mother's role in the clan, and I don't want to spoil that too much. But his storyline just kind of stopped. It felt like it just kind of ended, and I think they do tie up that general storyline with a little bow, so you do get an ending there, but I do wish you would have followed more of Edward's connection with Aaron and his connection with the modern world. I wish the storylines would have been tied together a little more than they were, I think. But beyond that, it was good. It was a solid horror. This one was a 3.5 star for me. Okay, our last one is the first nonfiction I have read in months. Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI, from David Grann. So this one, I feel like everybody has kind of heard of this. It was just made into a Martin Scorsese movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. And I've seen the movie before, and the movie was very good. But I never read the book. So I really liked the writing in this one. It was very descriptive. It kept you interested in the narrative while still being accurate, historically accurate. And the sources look good. Everything looks great. But it was very intriguing and it was interesting, and I enjoyed the tie-in from the journey of the Osage people and what they were really suffering from, and also the aspect of how the FBI was taking form and sort of what was going on with the investigators. So this book follows the Osage people in the 1920s when they come into quite a lot of money from the oil business. They discover oil on their land, they have the mineral rights, so they become very rich. But in the 1920s, a bunch of murders start to happen. Like in the multiple murders. You pass the 10s, you pass the 20s. And so the FBI, which is sort of a fledgling institution at that point, sends members down to Oklahoma to try and figure out what is going on with the Osage people who was responsible for these murders, and that sort of thing. Overall, I think this was a really solid nonfiction. It's good, it's interesting, you learn a lot about the Osage murders and the birth of the FBI. It's good, this is great. This one ended up being a 4.5 star. Super solid, maybe not quite a 5 star, but a really good book that you should pick up. Okay, so those were the 8 books, and we're all caught up, we are all good. And this time around, I promise, I will be back to you next week. If you want to stick around, that would be great. That would be wonderful. I could see you next week and we can talk about more books. So now we're going to finish it off with the what am I reading, what am I watching, what am I listening to segment. And you should tell me in the comments down below, if you're here, what are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you reading? And maybe we like the same things. So what I'm reading this week is The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. So this book follows the issues with Fort Sumter right before the beginning of the Civil War. And I've read In the Garden of Beasts from Erik Larson before, which centers around World War II. And that was very good. He's a very good writer. I'm enjoying this one so far. I think I still have like 400 pages. So I have a lot to get through, but I really like it so far. So next up, what am I watching? So I just started The Midsomer Murders this week, which is sort of a classic 90s British crime drama following Detective Tom something. I don't remember his last name. But he's in sort of the Midsomer area in England, very wealthy area, and just investigating all the murders that happen there. It's classic, not super gory, very entertaining. I'm enjoying it. And then we'll finish it off with what am I listening to? I'm listening to the Emma Chamberlain podcast. I like Emma Chamberlain. I like her takes. I like listening to those podcasts. You never know if you're just going to get, a podcast on limiting beliefs about yourself, or if you're getting a podcast on psychedelic drug use. Who knows? It's always a grab bag. I always enjoy it. I think she's very smart. I like her takes. It's interesting. Okay, well, thank you for coming back. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to subscribe, that would be great. You can see what's happening next week when I promise I will be here.